I'm so glad you found your way here. Perhaps you're like me. You found yourself awake when the rest of the world is draped in shadows, staring at the ceiling as the clock ticks toward that quiet, sacred hour of 3 in the morning. Before we begin our journey today, I want to be very open with you. To share these reflections and prayers with as many people as possible, I've used some modern tools, including artificial intelligence, to help craft the voice, the images, and the flow of our conversation. My goal is simple: to sit with you as a friend and a fellow traveler and share some of the things I've learned about faith and the quiet power of prayer. What I'm about to share are my own personal experiences and the stories I've witnessed in my community. These aren't absolute blueprints or guaranteed formulas for a miracle. Faith doesn't always work like a vending machine, but they are the moments of grace that have kept me standing when life felt too heavy. If you have a different perspective or a story of your own, I'd truly love to hear it in the comments. We are all just walking each other home, aren't we? I remember my late mother used to call 3 a.m. the Watchman's hour. I can still see her, a small silhouette in the blue light of our old kitchen in Ohio, her worn Bible open on the table and a faint steam rising from her mug of chamomile tea. As a young man, I didn't understand it. I'd stumble in late or wake up for a glass of water and ask, "Mom, why are you up so early?" She'd just smile, her face lined with the beautiful maps of a life well lived, and say, "Son, the world is too noisy in the afternoon. But at 3 a.m., I can hear the Lord's whisper above the wind. I'm just keeping watch over this family." Now that I'm older, now that the house is quieter and the joints ache a bit more when the rain rolls in, I find myself in that same kitchen chair. For a long time, waking up at 3 a.m. felt like a burden, a symptom of getting older or having too many worries on my mind. I'd worry about the bills, the kids, or that nagging pain in my lower back. But then I remembered my mother's Watchman's hour. I began to realize that with my own gray hair came a new kind of strength. I wasn't just awake, I was being called to an appointment. There's something profound that happens when you stop fighting the wakefulness and start embracing the stillness. In the quiet, I started to bring my burdens to the Alpha and the Omega. I didn't find that my problems vanished instantly. The mortgage didn't pay itself that night, but I found that my heart changed. The fear that felt like a mountain at midnight felt like a small pebble by 4 a.m. In this hour, I've realized that God isn't looking for a perfect theological lecture. He's looking for a heart that is willing to sit in the dark and trust that the light is coming. Whether you are here because you need a breakthrough in your health, your finances, or your family, or maybe you just need to feel less alone in the dark, I want you to know that your presence here is no accident. We are going to explore what it means to clothe ourselves in prayer during this sacred time, looking at the lives of those who stood at the same crossroads and found a path forward. This isn't about promising you a quick fix. It's about sharing how, for me, the 3 a.m. prayer became a fortress. It became a place where I could lay down the heavy rucksack of my life and realize I didn't have to carry it alone. I don't know if your experience will be exactly like mine, but I hope that as we talk, you find a little bit of that shalom, that peace that surpasses all understanding right where you are. There is a specific kind of silence that settles into a house when you are dealing with a body that doesn't quite obey you anymore. I think about my friend Andre often. Andre was a retired mechanic, a man whose hands were once strong enough to pull engines apart and put them back together with his eyes closed. But by the time he reached 72, those hands were gnarled with arthritis, and a lingering respiratory issue made every breath feel like he was inhaling through a thin straw. I remember visiting him on a Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting in his recliner, the smell of menthol rub thick in the air. He looked at me, his eyes tired, and said, "You know, the hardest part isn't the pain. It's the feeling that I'm becoming a stranger to my own skin." He had prayed for healing for months, perhaps years. He had been to the specialists, followed the prescriptions, but the miracle he expected, the one where he woke up feeling 25 again, just hadn't arrived. But Andre did something that changed my own perspective on prayer. He started setting his alarm for 3 in the morning. He told me, I figured if I'm going to be awake coughing anyway, I might as well talk to the great physician. Andre didn't approach God with a list of demands. He told me he began by simply acknowledging Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. He would sit in his living room, his breath heavy and labored, and instead of focusing on the pain in his chest, he began to pray for the vitality of his spirit. He told me, I asked the Lord to heal my mind of the bitterness I felt about being old and sick. I asked him to sanctify my body, even if it was a temple with a few leaks in the roof. Over the course of a few weeks, something remarkable happened. Now, I want to be very clear. Andre still has arthritis. He still uses his inhaler. But the divine healing he experienced was something much more profound than just the absence of symptoms. The heavy fog of depression that had settled over him lifted. He found he had the strength to walk to the end of his driveway again. One morning, he woke up and realized the sharp, stabbing sore throat that had plagued him for weeks was simply gone. With my eyes, I saw a man who moved from being a victim of his illness to being a steward of his health. He told me that during those 3 a.m. hours, he felt a vitality flow through his bones that medicine couldn't explain. It was as if his body was being sustained by a different kind of fuel. For those of you listening who are battling a diagnosis, or perhaps just the wearying effects of time, I want to share Andre's secret. Don't just pray for the pain to stop. Pray for your spirit to be whole. I've found in my own life that when I stop fighting the reality of my physical weakness and start inviting God into that weakness, a strange kind of strength takes over. I'm not saying that every sickness will vanish with a single prayer. I don't believe life is that simple. But I do believe, based on what I saw in Andre and what I've felt in my own quiet hours, that God cares about every cell and tissue. He is the weaver of our destinies and the architect of our lives. When we declare our bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit, even in the middle of the night, we are reclaiming our ground from fear. Sometimes the breakthrough isn't the cure. Sometimes the breakthrough is the peace that allows you to live fully in spite of the ailment. And in that peace, often, the body begins to follow the Spirit's lead toward a better, more vibrant day. Money is a heavy thing to carry, isn't it? Especially when you reach a stage in life where you feel like your options for making more are limited. I've seen that weight bow the shoulders of many good people. But I think most often of a man I knew named Gogita. Gogita had worked hard his whole life, but at 60, he found himself in a position he never expected, out of work for 7 months. He was applying for jobs non-stop, positions he was overqualified for, positions he could do in his sleep, but the phone just wouldn't ring. When you're in your 60s and you've been out of work for that long, the silence of the world feels like a judgment. He told me he reached a point where he didn't even know what else to do. His savings were dwindling, and the golden years were starting to look very grey. He'd heard about the discipline of the 3 a.m. prayer, and though he was skeptical, he decided to give it a go. He told himself he would do it for 7 days, a full week of seeking God's righteous judgment in his finances. Now, Gogita didn't pray for a lottery win. In those quiet hours, he started by uprooting the spirit of lack and stagnation that had taken root in his mind. He told me, I realized I was praying like a beggar instead of a child of the King. He began to decree that his skills and his passions were still valuable, still part of a divine plan. He'd sit at his kitchen table with his bills spread out, and instead of trembling at the numbers, he would place his hands over them and say, Lord, you are my provider. I am the lender and not the borrower. On the 7th day of his prayer journey, something shifted. It wasn't a thunderbolt from the sky. It was a simple email. A company he had applied to months prior, one he had completely given up on, contacted him for an interview. It happened with a speed that made his head spin. Within a week of finishing that dedicated prayer time, he had an offer in hand. When he told me about it, he wasn't just happy about the paycheck. He was transformed by the realization that God hadn't forgotten him in the desert. I look at my own life and I see the times I've felt that same scarcity, the fear that there just isn't enough to go around. But what I've learned from Jojita's story and from my own late-night sessions with the Lord is that the breakthrough often comes when we stop looking at our bank accounts and start looking at our source. I'm not telling you this to say that if you pray at 3 a.m., a check will appear in your mailbox tomorrow morning. Life has its seasons of pruning and its seasons of growth. But I am sharing this because I believe that when we realign our lives with God's purpose at 3 in the morning, we are clearing the spiritual blockages that keep us from seeing the opportunities right in front of us. If you are facing a financial struggle today, I want to encourage you. Don't let the spirit of scarcity steal your sleep. Use that time to declare your victory. Trust in the providence that feeds the birds of the air and clothes the lilies of the field. Sometimes the unexpected provision is simply the courage to keep knocking until the right door swings wide open. There is a unique kind of heaviness that settles on a heart when you are worried about someone you love. For many of us in our later years, our prayers aren't even for ourselves anymore. They are for our children, our grandchildren, and the homes we've spent a lifetime building. I think about my neighbor, Nicole. Nicole is the kind of woman who always has a smile for everyone, but for a long time, I could see a flickering shadow behind her eyes. Her grandson, a young man she had practically raised, had taken a path that led him far from the values she held dear. He was in trouble, the kind of trouble that keeps a grandmother staring at the porch light at 2 in the morning, wondering if the phone is going to ring with bad news. She told me one morning over the garden fence, "I've tried talking, I've tried crying, and I've tried shouting. None of it reached him." Then she decided to stop fighting him and start fighting for him. In the Watchman's hour, Nicole began waking up at 3 a.m. to clothe her home and her grandson in prayer. She told me she would walk through her house, room by room, whispering the names of her family. She wasn't just asking for him to be good, she was seeking a divine covering, a shield that would guard his thoughts and his dreams from the assaults of a world that can be very cruel to a young man who has lost his way. She shared with me that by the 5th day of this prayer, she felt a peace she couldn't explain. She said, "I realized he wasn't just my grandson, he was God's child first. I had to surrender my anxiety and trust in the watchful eyes of the Almighty." The extraordinary miracle she received wasn't an instant transformation of his life. It was a phone call. Not a call of trouble, but a call from him saying he was coming home for dinner. It was the first time in years he had sought her out without wanting something in return. It was a breakthrough in the wall of silence that had grown between them. When I look at my own family, I realize that our prayers at 3 a.m. are like a spiritual fortress. We might not be able to be with our loved ones every second of the day, but our prayers can reach places our feet can never go. I truly believe that when we rise in the stillness to intercede, we are securing our homes under a protection that the world cannot provide. If you have a prodigal in your life, or if you simply fear for the safety of your loved ones in these uncertain times, I want to encourage you to use this sacred hour. Don't let your thoughts spin in circles of worry. Turn that worry into a shield. I don't know exactly how God will move in your family, but I have seen, through Nicole and through my own experiences, that a grandmother's or a grandfather's prayer at 3 a.m. is one of the most powerful forces on this earth. As the years stack up behind us, we tend to carry more than just physical belongings. We carry memories, some as light as a summer breeze, and others that feel like lead in our pockets. I remember a man named Mr. Henderson, a veteran who lived just a few houses down from my childhood home. He was a man of few words, always meticulously tending to his lawn, but there was a stiffness in his posture that didn't come from his age. It came from regret. One evening, sitting on his porch, he admitted to me that the quiet of the night was his greatest enemy. "In the dark," he said, "the mistakes I made 40 years ago find their voice. I can't seem to outrun them." He was haunted by words he'd said in anger and decisions he'd made in his youth that had fractured his relationships. He was a believer, yes, but he was living in a prison of his own making. Mr. Henderson began to join in that 3 a.m. tradition, but his prayers were different. He didn't ask for things. He went into that hour to do the hard work of the soul. Forgiveness. He told me he began to pray specifically for the strength to release the bitterness he held toward himself. He would sit in his favorite armchair, the house silent around him, and whisper, "Lord, I release every ounce of this grudge. I break the bonds of these past mistakes." He shared with me that it didn't happen overnight. It was like peeling an onion, one layer of resentment at a time. But in that sacred hour, away from the judgment of the world, he found a merciful Father who wasn't interested in his past, but in his peace. He began to replace those painful memories with the truth that he was already forgiven. I watched Mr. Henderson change. The stiffness in his shoulders softened. He started reaching out to the people he had drifted away from, not with a demand for their forgiveness, but with a humble heart that had already found peace within itself. He told me, "I realized that the anchors of the past were only holding me back because I refused to let go of the rope." I think many of us carry those same anchors. We lie awake at 3 a.m., replaying scenes from decades ago, wondering, what if? But I found that this is the perfect hour to mend the brokenness. When we bring our scars to the feet of Jesus in the stillness, he doesn't just hide them, he transforms them into testimonies. I'm not suggesting that a lifetime of regret vanishes in 5 minutes. But I am saying that there is a special grace available in the pre-dawn light for the one who wants to be free. For me and for Mr. Henderson, the breakthrough wasn't that the past changed, it was that the past lost its power to hurt the present. If you are struggling with a memory that won't let you go, use this time to surrender it. Let the Spirit renew your mind. You might just find that you've been holding the key to your own cell all along. Patience is a virtue we're told to have, but when you're in the middle of a long winter, it feels more like a burden. I think of a woman I met through my church named Lolita. Lolita had been waiting for a specific breakthrough, a legal and family matter regarding her home, for 3 long years. She had done everything right, filled out every form, and made every phone call, but the door remained stubbornly shut. When you wait that long, hope can start to feel like a cruel joke. You begin to think, maybe this is just my lot in life. But Lolita didn't let her heart grow cold. She decided to dedicate her 3 a.m. hours to what she called expectant waiting. She told me, "I stopped asking God when he was going to move, and I started thanking him that he was already moving, even if I couldn't see it yet." She shared with me that during those quiet nights, she realized the difference between a shield and a key. Her prayer had always been a shield, protecting her from despair, but now she felt it becoming a key. She began to pray with an unwavering faith, declaring that no door God opens can be shut by man. She wasn't being dishonest about her struggle, she was simply being honest about her God. The breakthrough happened on a random Monday, just a day after she had felt particularly moved during her 3 a.m. prayer. After 3 years of no, she finally got the yes she had been praying for. When she told her story, she said the most beautiful thing: the 3 years weren't a waste. They were the time it took for my roots to grow deep enough to handle the blessing when it finally arrived. I look at my own life, and I see the things I'm still waiting for. It's easy to get discouraged when the calendar pages keep turning, but Lolita's journey reminded me that God's clock doesn't run on our time. I found that the 3 a.m. hour is the best time to realign my internal clock with His. If you've been waiting for a child to return, for a health report to change, for a door to open, don't mistake silence for absence. I've come to believe that sometimes God waits for the world to be completely quiet, so that when the breakthrough happens, there is no doubt about who made it possible. Use your waiting room as a prayer room. I don't know if your yes is coming tomorrow or next year, but I do know that the peace you find in the waiting is a miracle all its own. Making decisions as we get older seems to carry a different kind of weight, doesn't it? When we were young, we felt we had all the time in the world to correct a wrong turn, but now every choice feels more significant. I think of my friend Sarah, a woman of great grace who found herself at a crossroads after 40 years in the same house. Her husband had passed, the stairs were getting steeper, and her children were nudging her to move to a smaller place closer to them. Sarah was torn. One day she'd feel it was time to let go, and the next she'd be paralyzed by the fear of losing her memories along with the four walls that held them. She told me, "The world is so full of opinions. My kids have one, my realtor has another, and my own heart is just a noisy mess of nostalgia and fear." She decided to take her confusion to the 3 a.m. hour. She didn't go there to find an answer immediately. She went there to find clarity. Sarah told me that in the stillness, away from the well-meaning advice of her family, she began to ask for the spirit of discernment. She would sit in her darkened kitchen, watching the moonlight move across the floorboards, and simply listen. She said to me, "I realized that most of my life, I had been trying to shout my prayers over the noise of my own anxiety. But at 3 a.m., I finally learned to be still enough to hear the still, small voice." Over several nights, the fog began to lift. It wasn't a booming voice from the heavens, but a slow, steady sense of peace that settled in her chest. She realized she wasn't losing her past by moving. She was securing her future. The decision that had felt like a mountain for months suddenly became a clear, manageable path. When she finally told her children she was ready, there was no hesitation in her voice. I've faced those same foggy mornings myself, moments where I didn't know which way to turn or how to handle a complicated family situation. What I've learned from Sarah and from my own time in the quiet is that wisdom isn't something we have to manufacture. It's something we receive when we finally stop talking long enough to hear. If you are facing a big decision today, maybe it's about your living situation, your health, or a relationship, I want to invite you into the stillness. Don't let the noise of the world's shorts and musts drown out your intuition. I don't know exactly how your answer will come, but I believe that if you seek clarity in the sacred hour, you'll find that the path reveals itself, one step at a time. That still, small voice is always there. We just have to wake up early enough to hear it. There are nights when the darkness feels like more than just the absence of light. Sometimes it feels heavy, almost as if it's pressing against the windows. I remember a man in my community named Brother Thomas. He was a pillar of his church, a man who always had a kind word for the weary, but he came to me once and admitted he was going through a dark night of the soul. He felt an overwhelming sense of oppression, a spirit of fear and anxiety that seemed to follow him even into his dreams. "It's like an assault on my peace," he told me, his voice barely a whisper. "I wake up at 3 in the morning, and my heart is racing for no reason. I feel defeated before the sun even comes up." Brother Thomas decided to stop being afraid of those 3 a.m. wake-up calls. He decided that if the enemy was going to meet him in the dark, he would show up dressed for the occasion. He began to use that hour to put on his spiritual armor. He didn't just pray for the fear to go away. He began to rebuke the forces of darkness and every form of evil that sought a foothold in his mind. He told me, "I realized that at 3 a.m. my whispers were actually shouts in the spirit realm." He began to declare that his mind was guarded by a peace that surpasses all understanding. He would stand in his small living room and pray for a divine covering over his thoughts and his soul. He treated that time as a fortress, a shield that guarded him from the terrors of the night. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere in his home changed. The fear didn't just leave, it was replaced by a sovereign authority. Brother Thomas told me he started to feel untouchable by the powers of darkness because he was abiding under the safety of the Almighty's wings. He wasn't relying on his own strength, he was relying on the word that says no weapon formed against us shall prosper. I've had those nights too, where a sudden worry or a strange sense of dread tries to steal my sleep. But I've learned from Brother Thomas that we aren't helpless in those moments. We have a shield and a fortress. I don't believe we should live in fear of the arrows that fly by day or the shadows of the night. If you feel like you are under a spiritual cloud today, if anxiety or a sense of heaviness is draining your vitality, I want you to know that you are not alone. Use this sacred hour to reclaim your peace. I've found that when I start to praise and declare God's protection in the middle of the night, the darkness doesn't stand a chance. The breakthrough isn't just the morning light. It's the realization that the light was already inside you, fueled by the Spirit. There is something special about the number 7 in the stories of our faith. It represents a sense of completion, a full circle, a divine fulfillment. I remember a small group from my local church. We called ourselves the Early Risers. We were a handful of men and women, most of us over 65, who decided to commit to a 7-day cycle of 3 a.m. prayer together, each from our own homes. We weren't looking for a magic number, but we wanted to see what would happen if we gave God our consistency. One member, a quiet woman named Martha, was praying for a breakthrough in a long-standing family legal dispute. Another was seeking a spiritual momentum to overcome a period of deep stagnation and despair. We agreed that for 7 days we would rise up 3, uproot every spirit of complacency and replace it with a renewed spirit of diligence and commitment. By the 4th or 5th day, something changed in the group's spirit. It wasn't just that things were happening, it was that we were happening. We felt like we were soaring with wings like eagles. Martha told me that by the 7th day, the fear that had paralyzed her for months had turned into a fertile ground for growth. She felt a divine momentum released into her life. Shortly after our 7 days ended, the legal matter that had been stuck for over a year suddenly moved toward a peaceful resolution. I've seen this in my own life as well. Sometimes a single prayer is like a spark, but a consistent 7-day journey is like building a fire that warms the whole house. It's about teaching our hearts to expect the extraordinary. When we commit to that cycle, we aren't just asking, we are abiding. I don't know if your breakthrough will come on day 1, day 7, or day 70. I am not a prophet and I don't hold the keys to the kingdom's clock, but I do know that there is a profound power in the discipline of showing up. If you feel led to pray this 3 a.m. prayer for the next 7 days, I encourage you to do it with an unwavering heart. Use this week to transform your wilderness into a spring of living water. Don't worry about the results. Just focus on the relationship. I've found that when I stop counting the days and start making the days count, the miracles have a way of finding me. Whether it's a renewal of your strength or a desert turning into a garden, trust that the number 7 is just a way for us to say to the Lord, I am here and I am staying until the sun rises. As I sit here in the quiet of my own home, watching the first faint sliver of gold begin to crest over the horizon, I feel a deep sense of peace. Our time together is coming to a close for today, but the journey you are on is just beginning. I've shared these stories of Andre, Nicole, Mr. Henderson, and the others not to give you a formula for a perfect life, but to remind you that you are part of a much larger story. My own life hasn't been a straight line of easy victories. I've had my share of those long, lonely nights where the shadows seemed to stretch forever. But looking back, I realize that it was in those 3 a.m. hours that I truly learned who God is. He isn't just a God of the mountaintops, He is the master of the wind and waves in the middle of our storms. I don't know what brought you here today. Maybe it was a physical pain that medicine can't quite touch, or a financial worry that keeps you up at night. Maybe you're just tired of carrying the weight of the past. Whatever it is, I want to leave you with this thought. The breakthrough you are seeking often begins with the quiet surrender of your heart. When we stop trying to fix everything with our own weary hands and start placing them in His, the atmosphere changes. I found that the greatest miracle isn't always the big change in my circumstances, it's the change in me. It's the strength to walk and not faint, the hope that refuses to be snuffed out, and the peace that allows me to sleep soundly even before the answer arrives. I don't say this as an expert, but as someone who has sat in the same dark rooms you are sitting in. If you have felt a tug in your spirit during our talk, I encourage you to lean into it. Don't be afraid of the quiet. Don't be afraid of the Watchman's hour. If you feel led, I invite you to join us in that 7-day journey we talked about. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know how you're doing. Let's be that community that keeps watch for one another. I don't claim to have all the answers, and I certainly don't know what tomorrow holds for each of us. But I do know that His goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our lives. As the sun finally rises over the hills, I want to thank you for spending this sacred time with me. May you walk out into your day today not with the spirit of fear, but with the power, love, and sound mind that has been promised to you. Your life is a living testament, and the dawn is closer than you think. God bless you, and may you find exactly what your soul needs in the stillness of the morning.